Welcome aboard the Athletics Can't Wait Jets podcast, your nonstop shop for all things Jets with Tim McMaster, Zack Rosenblatt, and Marissa Dunn.
Can't wait!
The owners' meetings are over. Aaron Rodgers is still a member of the Green Bay Packers. We're updating you on the latest offseason news surrounding the New York Jets. I'm Tim McMaster, along with our Athletic Jets reporter, Zack Rosenblatt, and Marissa Dunn, our producer. Please subscribe on wherever you listen, whether it's the audio version or if you're checking us out right now live on YouTube, hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to us on YouTube as well. We're up over 6,000 subscribers there, looking to get to 10 during the next upcoming season. That is the new goal for us. Before we get to all this Jets stuff, the owners' meetings were in Arizona, and Zack has some Arizona adventures that we want to talk about. But I just want a public service message for people out there to trust your GPS when you're driving. So I drove up from Pennsylvania to the Boston area on Sunday, and there's a little stretch of the Mass Pike that we're on. It's like 10 miles. You get on one exit, get back off. Usually very fast, no problem. It's the Mass Pike. It's like 4 lanes. So the GPS, as we're getting to that point, was like, get off. Like for 2 straight exits, it was like, get off. And I was like, okay, it's probably one of these things where the GPS is like,
save
if
you
you get
3 minutes.
off here, you'll
Yeah.
save 3 minutes by driving through like towns and like around crazy twisty turns and all this stuff. And I was like, it's such an easy part of the drive. I'm not going to listen to the GPS. We're getting on the highway.
Bold.
So we get on the Mass Pike and we drive for like half a mile, and there's like a wall of cars in front of us.
Oh no.
And like, oh, this isn't good. So it took us 2.5 hours to
Oh.
drive 5 miles,
Jesus.
which
Oh
is
my God.
hard. It's hard to drive that slowly, like literally, like
With
stopping.
a kid in the car. Yeah.
With an unhappy kid. Oh, and there was so many cars packed in the small area that the cell reception went out.
Oh no.
So the 18-month-old did not have YouTube,
Oh no.
which we do not
to watch
she-
Can't Wait episodes, right?
Right. She does not
Exactly.
watch very much video in general. Like that's something we're very cautious of, like no screen time, but like in the car, long drive, like
You
And we had that,
got to seed sometimes.
we invented new versions, new lyrics to Wheels on the Bus.
Oh wow.
around.
Yeah, I think
so
that'd
if you ever
be some
need-
high quality footage if we have any of that. Yeah.
Yeah,
See, I
that
want
has
to
been-
know if it caused a fight. Like, why didn't you listen to the GPS? Because that's what would happen in our car. Like,
Oh yeah, well, that
you
happened.
know, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
that
conversation happened. But then
Like-
that's followed up with, well, but if I get off and it's a really curvy road and then you like don't feel well because
Nice
of all the twists and
justification,
turns,
yeah.
then it's a no-win.
Yeah.
The person driving.
Yeah.
Also,
No
that drive up there is brutal. Like regularly, I drove all the way to Maine one summer for a wedding, and like the traffic in Connecticut is
Yeah,
awful.
it's rough.
It's awful.
Connecticut's the worst.
And this is
Yeah,
a very
84
tough
and-
week.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
also
You know,
a tough
spring
week.
break,
Spring break, yeah.
Passover, Easter, the
So trust
travel.
your GPS. That's the moral of the story.
Yeah. Or if you're like Zach, you could trust your
Oh
driverless
yes,
car.
good transition, Marissa.
Nice, Marissa. That's
Thank
good.
you.
Good
Go
producer
ahead,
work
Zach.
there.
Adventures
Yeah, I
in
took
Arizona.
I took a driverless car. I tweeted out the video. I think unanimous. Like there's very few people who said anything but why would you do that? I would never do that. Are you insane?
This was clearly in Arizona, not in the New York.
Yeah.
tri-state
It was in
area.
Arizona. It was only like a small part of like Phoenix. So I was with my college friend. I got to Arizona early. I was with my college friend and his girlfriend. We went out to like a bar one night, and they wanted to do this driverless car thing. They just kind of ordered. I didn't realize it was happening until we were. Then the car pulls up. It's like a Jaguar.
Wow.
And she has to like click. It doesn't unlock until she clicks a button on an app. You have to click unlock. Then we all of us sat in the back because we're like, I don't know if I want to sit up front. And so we're all squeezed into the back. Very true, Michael Dunn. Great comment about Connecticut being the worst. And so we get in the back, and the car just starts. It like has the directions of where you're going. There's like a screen, and it says pull over. There was one more thing, and you can like pick music, and we did it. It was a short drive, so that's why I was okay with it. I get why a lot of people are uncomfortable with it because technology is gonna, Skynet us at some point, but because all the AI stuff out there. But it was very weird. I tweeted a video of it. Would I do it like more than a 5-minute drive? I don't know. I don't know if I want to go on like the highway with that thing or something.
Yeah.
Because it was braking a lot, like, which I guess is out of safety, I guess. I don't know. But it was definitely very strange. As an addendum to that too, big time Connor, he had a rental car and they like upgraded him to like a Tesla. So he was driving a Tesla around Arizona.
He
And
probably
I'm
felt
sure
so
that didn't
cool.
go to his head at all.
He felt
Yeah.
pretty cool. And there's like a somewhat like automatic driving feature on there, and he kept trying to do it. And when it was doing it, he was like so excited. It like wouldn't do like a sharp turn, only went like a little bit. But he's like, "Oh my god!" He like took a video of it, sent it to Bree. He was so excited with himself.
I actually think I might choose
the driverless car. Yeah, we're Conning it.
instead of the Tesla with
a lot less talking from the.
I hope he's not listening to this.
He's not.
One last thing before we get to the Jets, and that is the other thing you tweeted from Arizona. Well, the other interesting thing in my mind that you tweeted from Arizona was the flight of iced coffee. And the one thing that we promised we would talk about here on the pod is, you had 6 iced coffee cups on this flight, which is the greatest thing I've ever seen. But did you go around back and forth, jump around, or did you go one at a time and down the iced coffee?
So I went, my initial run through was just like down the line to see which ones I liked the most.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, that's when I started, hammering the ones I liked more to like finish them off. And by the end, like I would say, it's like, it was a worthy experience and I enjoyed it, but also there was so much caffeine.
Yeah.
Like I love coffee, as we've talked about in here, but I also am the type that like if we're talking like Starbucks sizes, I would order like a grande iced coffee and maybe don't even finish it all the way, kind of thing. Like I just need like the hit of it. I don't need like the whole thing. Is how I am with coffee. And so this was like they were like small, but like big enough that like 2 of them you probably would have been okay, and there was like 5 of them, however many. So I was like wired the rest of the day, and I crashed pretty hard later that day. But yeah, people were hyped, very hyped. They were excited about that. They were scared of the driverless car. I would be more scared of all the caffeine, to be honest.
True.
All right, let's move on to the Jets. What do you say?
Do we have to?
We've tortured people enough.
That's the longest we've gone without talking about Jets. Usually it would be a lot longer back in the pre-me days, right?
Yes, that's true. But that was 7 minutes of nonsense. That's pretty good. All right. Well, the Jets, we got to start with Aaron Rodgers because it's like we used to start with Zach Wilson every episode, and now it's Aaron Rodgers, and it'll probably continue.
Who's not on the Jets still?
Yeah, true.
Right.
We'll start with the quarterback.
Zach Wilson's still the only Jets quarterback, really.
Yeah.
Chris Trevler. Somebody pointed out that Chris Trevler is on the roster. And if Zach Wilson is the QB2, that means technically Chris Trevler is the QB1 right now, according to.
That's a good point, because they did declare Zach the number 2. Yeah.
Right. So for now. All right, so the deal was not done. We had some hope that the deal might get done while out there with all parties present. So Zach was progress made. And Woody was out there, Joe was out there, Saleh was out there. The Packers people were out there. We know Saleh's obviously got plenty of friends on that side too, but they apparently don't talk about Aaron Rodgers. So where are we now with Aaron Rodgers?
You said we had hope going in. That just made me think of the Ted Lasso quote from the AFC Richmond fans, where they say it's the hope that kills you. That's kind of how I feel right now. I've been hopeful. Somebody in the chat earlier said, I think we're going on 4 straight weeks of saying it might get done at the end of this week. I've given up on saying that. Selfishly, I hope it doesn't happen at the end of this week, because I'm going to be on vacation.
Yeah.
And I, as I was telling you guys before, not to get too off track, although it seems like that's kind of how we're doing, because not much.
That's what the off season's for.
Yeah. I like booked this trip like a month ago down to Florida, going to Boca. And I'd avoided like even bringing it up to my editor as long as I possibly could, because I wanted to make sure the Rodgers trade didn't happen. I thought it would be done by now. And so now we're in the week of the trip, and I had to call my editor, and I'm like, hey, it's okay if I take PTO at the end of this week. And she said yes. But anyway, as for Arizona, like I did feel like, it seemed like coming out of there, a lot of the noise was it's a lot closer than everybody thinks. And I think it is close, but there's like, I think they're playing a game of chicken. I think they both reached like the wall of like, all right, this is what we want. And the Packers are like, all right, well, this is what we want. I don't know if a first round pick is necessary. The 13, I don't get the vibe that that's actually going to be in the talks, or at least Joe Douglas has kind of removed it from the table. I think I'd said the whole time, if it didn't happen at the end of last week, then it might go up until the draft, because I don't know what what's going to change between now and then. Just somebody has to, give up the goods. And, as we keep going with this, I hate talking about the leverage and all that stuff, but I really do think the Jets are in a good position here where they can wait as long as they want. I don't know if they feel like they need Rodgers to be there for OTAs. I don't know if he would go anyway. So the draft looks like the target date now. Like I don't really know why the Packers aren't relenting. Maybe they feel like they can get more out of the trade or what, but it's pretty clear that this is holding up a lot of the Jets offseason. Corey Davis is still lingering on the roster. And I don't think he's going to be on it when the season starts. And especially because we're going to get into Odell. I feel like he might wind up being a Jet. And if he is, then Davis definitely isn't back. Saleh had some interesting stuff about Davis we can talk about. But anyway, they haven't made a lot of moves. I know fans are getting impatient. Ben Jones is still out there. They lost out on Calais Campbell. He was supposed to visit, and then instead he signed with the Falcons. So they're kind of in a holding pattern. They don't have a lot of cap space right now, and they need, the draft. They need to pay the draft class and all that stuff. So I think it's pretty clearly holding them up a little bit. Nobody in the Jets building is panicking. I don't get that vibe at all. I think they're pretty calm and patient about this. I don't know what the Packers vibe is, but I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't be surprised that nothing has happened yet, but it's just like so weird. There's been just like silence now. It almost seems like both teams are all right, we'll just wait. And so there hasn't been anything new to come out. Every now and then you'll have a national reporter be like, I think the draft is the day to look at. I think Albert Breer reported last week he thought it could happen at the end of the week, and I kind of felt similarly. And at this point, I'm done. We're gonna. I'm contradicting myself because we're gonna predict when it's gonna happen shortly. But I'm done like guessing. Like I'm done being like, all right, I think it might happen this week. All right, I think it might happen this week. Like I don't think anybody knows, and there doesn't seem to be. The weirdest part is this has to be one of the most unique like trade situations ever, where a guy is on a roster. He declared he wants to go to one team, and so it's really just the two teams negotiating. It's a matter of when. Like it's just like there's so many aspects to this that are. I don't think anything like this has ever happened before, where it's just like they basically have agreed to a trade without agreeing to a trade, and so they're both lingering. He's still on the Packers. The Jets are kind of in a holding pattern. It's the middle of the offseason already, and they still don't technically have their quarterback. But I don't have an answer about when it's going to happen. We'll get into our predictions for when, but the draft is obviously the first day that it matters.
Before our predictions, something you mentioned there, I just want to follow up on. You said, who knows if Rodgers would go to OTAs anyway, which is interesting because he's got a whole bunch of teammates to meet and get to know, right? So to me, when you get traded to a new team, like even if you're the Hall of Fame quarterback who's been through all of this and normally would skip voluntary workouts, I feel like that's the time you go, right? Like, but who knows? Like we've talked plenty about Aaron Rodgers being a little different, but to me, it sets the wrong tone because I would imagine his teammates would like to see him there.
Yeah, it was Saleh, Douglas, and Woody all tried to. They tried to like balance not saying his name directly while talking about him. It was very interesting the way they approached it. But Saleh had a comment that without saying a bunch of names, you knew what he was talking about. He's like, if a veteran quarterback, has familiar with an offensive coordinator, gets familiar with the offensive coordinator and how he calls plays, then it wouldn't be too much of a concern if he missed some practice time. So essentially saying Rodgers has Hackett. He knows how that operates. But I agree with you. Like, I think it goes two ways. On one hand, you want the quarterback to build chemistry. There's timing. There's all that stuff that you deal with the quarterback and receivers. I also think Rodgers isn't like Zach Wilson or a young quarterback where Rodgers is probably going to figure it out regardless of how much practice time he gets with these guys. But, someone like Garrett Wilson might need to learn Rodgers' tendencies and how he goes about it. And, they haven't been in the same room together yet, as far as I know. So, yeah, I mean, he at the very least, you'd want him there for a mandatory minicamp and ideally more than that. But I think the bigger point is I think the Jets are posturing that we don't care if he's there for OTAs as a way of letting the Packers know, like, hey, if you want to wait, then we'll wait. Like, that's fine with us.
Maybe it helps the Jets out because, like, if Rodgers is a Jet and skips OTAs, maybe that causes some friction in the locker room. You know what I mean? Like, oh, why isn't that?
So like this is the Jets' way of having an excuse,
right?
Why
but if they don't get the trade done, it's like he's off the hook, right? He can't be at OTAs.
Like, oh, sorry guys, I don't know what you want me to say. He's not on our team yet. Yeah.
That's Joe Douglas playing chess right there. Let's see. All right, predictions. when I was just going to say draft day, I was going to say April 27th as the day this deal gets done, leading up to.
But
Now,
so,
I don't
okay,
know if
so
that's like moments before.
I was going to say, but what
the
part, what
13th
time of the
pick.
day what time of the day do you think then?
Well, if one of you guys was going to go with April 27th,
Well, I'm gonna say April 28th because I'm gonna say they don't trade the first, and so they get to day 2, and they're like, all right, let's do the trade.
Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about you, Marissa? Because if we end up on the same day, then we have to go down to hour.
Yeah.
I was gonna say the morning of the draft
Of
because
round 1, yeah.
didn't we have Rodgers stuff the morning of the draft 2 years ago?
Yeah, that's when he like announced that he was coming back or whatever. Like he waited till that day. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a
So
good point.
that's my prediction. Morning of,
So
like
morning.
it. Yes.
Give
So
your
how about
predictions in the
this?
chat too. Yeah.
Marissa, yeah, let us know your predictions. Yeah, absolutely. Marissa, how about this? If it's before 2 p.m., you win.
Deal.
If it's after 2 p.m. but before midnight, I win. And
Okay.
if it's after midnight, Zach wins.
I like that.
So
Now, do I get all the days leading up to
Yeah,
that
I was going to say,
too?
if this is like, if this is
Well,
Price is Right,
we
if
got
this
to
is
take the
Price is
chat.
Right rules, if this is Price is
Yeah.
Right rules, then I win if they get any time after day 1.
Yeah.
Well, let's see what we get in
Yeah,
the chat
true.
too, because we
Fair.
get everybody that enters in the chat. We will track.
Yeah.
Oh, now somebody's going to make it so they win the Price is Right situation.
Yeah, I like closest. I don't like closest without going over. So
Gotcha.
Kyle in the chat says August 8th.
August
So he
8th.
doesn't think it's gonna happen until
that's
summer.
probably, I think that's probably when Favre was traded is why he said that, I'm guessing.
Okay.
That was August when they did
Henry
it 2
Strotter,
years ago.
September 1st.
Oh man.
Wow.
If we have to wait, Henry, you bite your tongue, buddy.
We did get a question. Any chance the Jets want to wait?
That
Do you think?
I think we just had our best answer right there.
2 minutes after the pod ends. That's a good answer. Yes. Yeah.
Maybe not this pod, but one of them for sure.
Yeah.
There.
Agreed with that.
What were you about to say, Marissa?
No, we just got a question, like any chance the Jets want to wait. I know you kind of touched on that, but like he said seems like they should stay put until the draft unless the Packers accept their offer.
Yeah,
now.
yeah. I think that's kind of what's going on right now. And they like I was curious to see because Joe Douglas has a habit of like not like saying much in his press conferences, but he made sure to be like, yeah, we're not in a rush, we can wait.
Right.
And I think that was very purposeful that he did that. So I think they're letting the Packers know, like, hey, you guys need draft picks this year. We're happy to use our draft picks if you don't want them.
Right.
So, and then if it
yeah.
turns to next year, then they probably more willing to give up a first next year because in theory it's going to be at the end of the first round. So
Right.
That's why I say even after the draft, I think the Jets hold all the cards ultimately.
Yeah, if the Jets use get their entire allotment of picks this year, that's a huge
the absolute win in a way. Yeah. So I again to circle back, my feeling, and I'm not like I don't know specific negotiating details or anything. I've been saying this though. I think the sticking point at this point is probably that the Jets want some protections in case Rodgers only plays 1 year. Whether that's they give up more depending on what they do with Rodgers, or if the Jets get like a pick back if he retires after 1 year, something like that. I feel like maybe the Packers are like, no, we don't want to help you out for having to deal with what we dealt with every year. And I feel like that's kind of the sticking point. I do think there's a degree of the Packers got a little angry / emotional about the way Rodgers tried throwing them under the bus in that Pat McAfee interview where you've seen the Packers GM come out and be like, he ghosted me. Like, what am I supposed to do? So I think they took some offense to the way Rodgers said that. And I don't know if that's effective in negotiations. I think being emotional in negotiations is probably not a good idea, but I feel like they were closer before that interview than after is what I would say.
Interesting.
All right, let's move on to the other guy that may or may not be a Jet. Well, I guess there's a lot of those, but the big name is OBJ, who made an appearance in Arizona, and Zach was there to film it. And there it is. That's great content.
Jets green pants.
If you're listening and not watching the podcast, Zach did get 7 seconds of OBJ walking through the outdoor pool lobby area at the Biltmore. So he was there, and obviously, and then he went to a Suns game with Saleh as well, right? So these are all good signs for the Jets. Where do you think this is? Because I know you've slowly come along on this. I think originally this isn't going to happen, and then I think last podcast you were more 50-50, and I think now are you even further? Are you think you believe? Are you a believer?
I am. We'll get if and when they do get him, we can debate, whether it was the right move, depending on how much they paid him and all that stuff. But it does feel like they're the front runner here, and it feels like if he's not waiting for Rodgers' thing to come about, he's at least waiting for a team to come in and offer him what he's looking for. I don't know if the reports about him asking for $15 million are accurate. I don't get the impression that that's the case. I think it's more, finding a happy medium and him going to a team where he thinks it'll be a 1-year deal. I imagine wherever he goes, even if it says like 3 years or 2 years, it's probably more of a 1-year deal with a lot of incentives and all that stuff. But yeah, I think there's real interest on both sides of the Jets and Beckham. I think Beckham and Rodgers have wanted to play together for a long time, which is a big part of it. I think Beckham was kind of smart in the way that he just kind of walked through the Biltmore. I think he only officially talked to the Ravens and Jets while he was in there. He lives in Arizona. He works out there. So it was smart for him to walk through there and cause a stir. It was funny just seeing all the reporters kind of slowly gravitate towards where he was. At one point I was with a couple Jets reporters after we talked to Joe Douglas, and he had just talked to Saleh, like he just like hugged Saleh and out in the open. So I don't know if the Jets were doing it on purpose out in the open like that, but he like hugged Saleh and was talking to Joe Douglas. He's walking by, and one of the Jets reporters was Andy Vasquez, was like, "Hey, do you want to go to the Jets?" And he politely declined to answer. But he knew what he was doing. Like I think Beckham, it was kind of like how Derek Carr went to Indianapolis. It kind of like makes it seem like whether there's a lot of interest in him or not, I'm sure there is. I think that was a smart move by him. But I get the impression that if they aren't the only team, I think they're one of the only ones to actually get into the negotiation stage with Beckham. I don't know what the numbers are, or if either side is happy with what they've seen, or if they're all just waiting for Rodgers. So then the Jets can look at their books and be like, all right, we need to get rid of Corey Davis. We need to clear this. We need to restructure this. Because right now, I don't even think they can technically afford Rodgers on their, I think his cap hit's like $16 million if they get him. I think they have $10 million in cap space right now. So there's some gymnastics they have to do to not only get Rodgers, but to clear cap for the draft class, and then to sign Beckham, Ben Jones, whatever it is. So a lot of work to be done, but yeah, I do think when the season starts, Odell Beckham is going to be wearing a Jets uniform.
I love the pro athlete showing up somewhere to be videotaped, like that move, like what Aaron Judge showing up at the San Francisco airport, with the camera, basically. And then what happens with stuff like this is, especially when you're in pursuit of something, all of a sudden fake rumors start happening. Like, oh, I spotted I saw a bunch of people sent me a thing. Aaron Rodgers was spotted seeking apartments in Hoboken. Oh yeah.
First of all,
where he's going to live.
He would not. Yeah. Number one, he's not going to live. No, Jets guys don't usually live that far from Florham Park. They usually live right there.
Right.
And the idea that he would, in the middle of all this, just be going to Hoboken himself to look at these places. I don't see how that would be. Maybe if he just wanted to go out in Hoboken, which I get. It's a lot of fun over there, but I don't know. I don't even know if that's his vibe, actually, to be honest with you. So
Hoboken doesn't. I don't think so.
By the way, I just made me think. I had a dream last night that I wound up talking to Odell Beckham, and he told me that he was signing with the Jets. So I got an exclusive. I happened to run into him, and I had a dream about that. So that'd be great.
There you go. Maybe you're bringing it to fruition.
Yeah.
I do have to give a shout out. I actually did go to Hoboken.
Oh yeah, I meant
2
to bring
weeks
that up,
ago, and I met a Can't Wait listener, Joe, who came up and introduced himself. And my cousins were like, they don't listen to my podcast. I was with a cousin night, so it was all my cousins, and they didn't know much about the podcast, and they were so impressed that somebody recognized me. So it was very cool. We talked a little Jets. It was really nice to meet him. So yeah, shout out to all of our listeners.
It's always funny seeing Can't Wait people out in the wild, because I never expected. Because I always used to joke. And maybe it's true. I used to joke that I have a face for radio whenever anybody would ask me why I'm not on TV. But nobody ever, because when you're just writing, nobody knows what you look like, really. They might hear your name, be like, oh, you're so-and-so, but nobody knew. And then I started doing this podcast, and the number of people that, I'm not trying to brag like Connor would or anything. I'm just saying the number of people that it's more than zero now, is that the number of people that will see me out in the world. I'd be like, hey, Zack Rosenblatt, I love the podcast.
Yeah, it's great.
It's pretty cool. So we love our Can't Wait community, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Marissa, are you more famous in Hoboken or Cleveland?
I don't know. Or Philly. I don't know if my Eagles.
Oh, true. Yeah.
We don't talk about that.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not aware of this podcast.
Yeah.
So really
There's another one. I don't know. All right, let's take a quick break. Come back, talk about Fletcher Cox and an update on the draft and what the Jets may do at the end of the month. We'll be right back. Okay, it's the moment we've all been waiting for here on the Can't Wait podcast. That's right. Magic Spoon is back with us. We are back eating the delicious cereal that you can get away with as an adult. Magic Spoon has replicated your favorite childhood cereals to taste good, but each serving contains 0 grams of sugar, 13 to 14 grams of protein, and 4 to 5 net grams of carbs per serving. It's a keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, and soy-free way to relive those moments watching your favorite cartoons. Plus, it's only 140 calories a serving. It's like there's magic in every spoonful. With over 8 unique flavors, you won't get bored of feeling good with Magic Spoon. The best thing to do, let's be honest, is to mix these. But my personal favorite, cookies and cream is great. Honey nut is great. And frosted is great. But if you take the frosted and the cookies and cream together, magic. The super popular previously limited edition only flavor is back, birthday cake. We're celebrating our birthday early with this fan favorite. If you've been a loyal listener to the Can't Wait podcast, you know how much all of us love Magic Spoon. And actually, now it's time to get Zach involved as well. So head to magicspoon.com/wait to grab a custom bundle of cereal and try the magic for yourself. And be sure to use our promo code WAIT at checkout to save $5 off your order. And Magic Spoon is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 100% happiness guarantee. So if you don't like it for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember, get your next delicious bowl of guilt-free cereal at magicspoon.com/wait and use the code WAIT to save $5 off. Thank you, Magic Spoon, for sponsoring this episode. All right, back to the Jets off season, and Fletcher Cox, who actually admitted on Chris Long's podcast that he was very close to being a Jet, so close that he had thought about numbers, and the fact that John Franklin Myers has his number 91, said that he would not have requested that one, but gone with a different number. That's pretty far down the path when you're thinking about stuff like that. That obviously would have been a great get by the Jets that they miss out on, Zach.
Yeah, and as we've talked about, and as I've learned that this is a thing, that spurred the reaction of, oh, the almost Jets would win a Super Bowl kind of thing.
They would be a great team.
Yeah, I mean, even this year you have Fletcher Cox, Calais Campbell, Orlando Brown. I believe there's another one that they went after. I can't think of.
There's also like the legitimate almost Jets.
Yeah, like ones that
for
like
every team.
Oh,
and
yeah,
then there's
Anthony Barr, the one where he agreed to sign and then changed his mind after the negotiation.
But then teams float that stuff too, right? Like that, and that happens in other sports.
Oh,
too,
totally.
Like, we had a great offer to that guy. He just took more money.
Well, it makes the agent feel better about like the number that they got or whatever. Right. Yeah. But I do think there was some negative reaction, like Joe Douglas, about like the fact that they never reeled these guys in. I don't think they said Fletcher Cox is a very unique case. The fact that he considered the Jets, I think the most interesting thought about that clip from the Chris Long pod is that Chris Long was like, because Chris Long was like, who are you close to signing with? Like, who is I gonna have to get mad about you signing with? Because he's like an Eagles guy now because he played for the Eagles a few years, won a Super Bowl there. And he's like, oh, that Jets is fine because Joe Douglas, that's like our brother. Like, he was an assistant GM there. I think that's pretty unique for assistant GM to be that close with like guys like that. I think that's why, like the fact that Fletcher Cox considered the Jets, I think had more to do with Joe Douglas than anything, I would say. And I know they offered him more money than he got from the Eagles. And I think from what I've heard, the Jets were like, they thought they had him. Like they thought they were signing Fletcher Cox. And then, it was a little hard for him to leave the only franchise he's played for forever. I think the Eagles wound up keeping more of their guys than anybody expected either. So yeah, I think, I know it's easy to get frustrated about the almost Jets and all that stuff, but it's pretty clear that Joe knows they need to upgrade the defensive tackle spot, especially with Sheldon Rankins leaving. There's not as many intriguing options in free agency, but maybe he's got something up his sleeve in a trade, or maybe they want to upgrade in the draft or something like that. But I don't know, a guy like Fletcher Cox who played with one team his entire career to be considered in the Jets, I do think that's a positive thing. Obviously, it doesn't really mean much because you didn't get him, and then Calais Campbell wouldn't even come into the building because the Falcons probably offered him more than the Jets were willing to, is my guess. But yeah, I don't know. It would have been very fascinating to see this defensive line with Fletcher Cox on it next to Quinn, and especially how much they rotate and could have preserved Fletcher, maybe extended his career a little bit. Quinnen has mentioned Fletcher as a guy he's like looked up to, so it would have been really cool to have him in the building. But ultimately, it's also hard to imagine Fletcher Cox in any other uniform besides the Eagles.
Yeah, that's true as well. All right. Let's look ahead to the draft a little bit. You took a different approach in a recent story, which I thought was really cool. Instead of just saying, here's my latest mock draft of what the Jets might do in April. It was more of a, here's the things they could do and what could shake out because of that sort of thing, which is good. And you go through a whole bunch. Let's touch on the first few at least. Draft outcomes. I think probably the most likely, it's the first one on your list as well. Draft an offensive tackle in the first round, right? Sure up the line for so many reasons. The depth of all the injuries they have. Aaron Rodgers is coming eventually, and all of that.
Yeah, and I think the fact that the Jets haven't really made any notable offensive line moves so far is pretty telling to me. In that I think they're hoping one of those three guys that we've talked about a lot already. We don't even talk about the draft that much. This isn't a draft pod as much as it used to be this time of the year. But Broderick Jones, Paris Johnson, Peter Skoronski, like if one of those guys are at 13, unless somebody, I keep saying this, unless somebody like very notable like a Jalen Carter falls, or like somebody that's not supposed to be there falls, feel pretty good about if they stay at 13, it being one of those three guys. And, I think it makes a lot of sense. You look at Dwayne Brown at left tackle, he's going to be 38, coming off shoulder surgery. They like him and they want to start him this year, but you need a long-term solution there. Right tackle, Mekhi Becton, who looks very thin and apparently worked out with Arnold the other day. He has played one game in the last 2 years, and Max Mitchell, who showed some promise, he had a blood clot condition or whatever it was. So there's a lot of questions there. They don't have any none of their offensive tackles you can point to and be like, he's going to be our starting tackle in 2024. And it's 2023 right now. So you pick the best offensive lineman available there if you can, unless there's a defensive lineman that you really like. I think it'll be one of those two positions if they stay at 13. But as I got into in the article, there's obviously other options like trading back, which I think as it gets closer and depending on how much they give up in the Rodgers trade, I feel increasingly confident that maybe that'll happen.
Yeah, and if you want to read the full article as we get through it, go to theathletic.com/can't wait to subscribe to The Athletic. What a great time right before the draft. Baseball season just started, all that stuff. Marissa, $2 again? $2?
Yeah, the $1 unfortunately I believe is over.
Yeah, it is.
But still a great deal. And lots of great stuff. The basketball
still much
tournaments,
less than an iced coffee.
Yes.
NBA playoffs are starting soon.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. All sorts of.
To read about Anthony Volpe, the local New Jersey star for the Yankees.
Actually, I will say the
Phillies.
I met Anthony Volpe back when he was in high school.
He's from the town next to me. So
yeah, he's from Jersey.
Watchung, New Jersey. Shout out. Yep.
Played on the same high school team with Leiter's kid.
Yes. Yeah. He went to Del Barton private school.
And I covered an event they played in down at the National High School Invitational, and he had an awful week. Like I don't think he had a hit, but he was awesome to deal with. And that was when he was 17 years old. And everything I've seen.
Which is not that long ago. He's only 21 now.
So I will say that
So you're rooting for him, Tim. You could tell us.
I'll root for him.
Okay. Mark this down on April 3rd. Tim is rooting for a Yankee.
We'll see. Anyway, number 2 on your list, Zach. Trade a second round pick to the Packers. Obviously, we thought when they made the trade to add a second round pick, that was all part of this plan, but who knows?
Yeah, I think the Elijah Moore trade and getting that second round pick, I think to me it seemed pretty obvious that they're probably going to trade one of those to Green Bay. They're back to back. Again, we talked about if they get through the draft and they don't have a trade done yet, then you get a first and 2 seconds within the first 2 rounds, and that's pretty valuable in itself. So it's a good spot to be in. And if in some worst case scenario they gave up their first, it wouldn't be that hard to trade back into the first round, I would say. Anyway, I don't think they will, or if there's a guy like last year you saw them trade up for Jermaine. If there's a guy in the late 20s that Joe Douglas really likes, I don't think he's going to be afraid to trade up, even after a Rodgers trade. They're all in on this year. So if somebody's there in the late first that they're like, we think this guy can help us right now, I wouldn't be shocked if Douglas traded up. I'm stepping on some of the other stuff that you're probably going to bring up. We won't go into every single thing I wrote in the article, but I still think a trade back. If I'm predicting right this minute, I think they do trade back from 13.
All right, and that was actually your next one, was trade back from 13 and then draft a defensive tackle with the first 2 rounds. So you mentioned that.
Yeah, it's kind of tied into that. Yeah.
So let's go to the next most likely thing I think is center, which maybe should even be higher as far as how much sense it makes, right?
Yeah.
They add a center.
Yeah, 13 is obviously too high for a center, but either if you trade back or with one of those second round picks, there's some really good center prospects in this draft, is my impression, like guys that you can plug in as a starter. I know a popular one amongst Jets fans is John Michael Schmitz. I think he went to Minnesota. He was like a star at the Senior Bowl.
He's a popular one amongst the whole league. So
yeah,
we'll
exactly. Which is why he feels like a guy who's going to wind up being a first round pick.
Yeah.
There's a guy named Joe Tippmann who's like a 6'5" center, which is like insane.
Yeah, I think so Michael, when he worked at the combine, met him. He was injured at the combine, I believe, correct?
Oh,
he did not compete.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
But he said he really liked him. He was a good dude. So
yeah. I mean, I haven't like grinded tape about these offensive linemen, if I'm being honest with you guys, but I've read some scouting reports and Dane Brugler's analysis, and it sounds like, I don't know if normally you would look at a 6'6" center or 6'5" and think that was like a good thing, because I think you want them to be lower to the ground normally, but it sounds like he's very athletic. There's a few other guys that are like guard center hybrids, but the Jets should cut, whether they sign Ben Jones or not. Ben Jones is going to be 34, I think, this year. You need it wouldn't be I've talked about this before. The Eagles do a great job of drafting like a year or two ahead of when they need a guy to plug in for one of their older guys to start. So the Eagles drafted Landon Dickerson. They wound up plugging him in at guard. They drafted a guy last year, Cam Jurgens. He's going to be their starting center whenever Kelsey retires. Like, it's good to build first of all, it gives you depth, and then it gives you like young guys you can develop without throwing them into the fire right away. So I think they should draft a center whether they get Ben Jones or not, and I think they might wind up getting Jones. So
as far as the trading back, do you think they only trade back from 13 if there's none of the offensive linemen there, or do you think they could do it even if one of those guys?
I think
because there was a little pushback in the chat about like, we need the offensive line.
Yeah. I forget the guy's name, but there's another offensive tackle that's viewed as a first round pick. I think he's from Ohio State, maybe. I'm blanking on the name. So he, in theory, could be an option if you trade it back. I just think especially if there's like a quarterback that falls to 13, if it's Anthony Richardson and a team is like desperate to get him, I'd be tempted to take Richardson personally, because I think the Jets
13.
The Jets do need a long-term quarterback, and he's a very developmental guy, is my impression. He's a freak of nature in a lot of ways. But yeah, so especially if a quarterback's there, it might be hard to turn down some of the offers that might come with that. Because
what about Hendon Hooker?
Hendon Hooker, I'm a big fan of him, and I think
because he's hurt, so he's not going to compete.
He'd be more of like a second round pick option, probably.
Right.
And Jets fans might not be
happy older too, right?
He's 25. He's older than Zach Wilson. Yeah,
he'll be 26 when the season starts.
But I think if he hadn't gotten hurt, he probably would have been a first round pick, because he was like really, really good. Again, that's another one. Okay, he is 25, so you don't want him on the bench for too long.
Right. But he's not going to play this year.
Exactly.
Either way.
Yeah. So and then that way you can still pretend like Zach Wilson is a guy you believe in or whatever. But I guess we didn't really talk about the Zach Wilson number 2 thing that much. So I mean, that was one of the things on the rankings that you're talking about, the quarterback thing, like how the possibility of them picking a quarterback at some point. I'm writing something for this week about what they need to do at quarterback outside of Rodgers. Like, do they actually believe in Zach Wilson? Should they draft somebody? What will their options be in like the middle rounds? Things like that. I don't see them drafting one in the first or second round, but if they believe, if Will Levis or Anthony Richardson's there at 13 and they're like, we think this guy's going to be a star. Like, it's hard. The Eagles have shown, again, I don't want to keep comparing everything to the Eagles, but like they operate in the right way in a lot of ways, and they're always thinking 2 steps ahead, and they drafted Jalen Hurts when they had Carson Wentz already, and it worked out. So if there's a quarterback there in the first or second round, and you're like, this guy might be a star, I think it's worth, getting the fans mad at us for not addressing other needs and getting a quarterback, because there's nothing more valuable than a talented quarterback. And you never know what's going to happen. We don't know if Rodgers is going to be our quarterback next year. So I wouldn't be opposed to taking a quarterback whenever you feel like, if they view a guy as a star, it's worth taking. But yeah, anyway.
Well, and Joe Douglas, where did he, come from?
Yeah.
The Eagles. So he's probably thinking similar things.
Yes.
All right. There's a lot of other good possibilities and stuff in that article as well. So definitely check it out. That just came out this morning, right, Zach? Yesterday.
No, that came out late last week. Yeah.
Oh, late last week. All right. So check that out as well. Anything else going on in the chat, Marissa, that we haven't covered?
No, I mean, a lot of people, like you said, chiming in about the quarterback. People, I don't think people would be as against it as you think, but I think it depends on who the quarterback is.
Yeah.
And when, like we said. And yeah, I mean, I feel like in years past, like the draft questions, like Zach said earlier, like we've been so much more like people want this guy, people want this guy, you have to take this person. And I don't get that. I mean, I don't get that sense this year. I think the Rodgers, the free agency, the vibes are a little different this offseason than the past two, which is interesting.
And
well, I feel like fans consider this team with Rodgers a contender.
And
right?
Odell.
So
I was
you
about
look
to
at
say,
the draft
yeah.
differently when you're a contender. You just
Totally.
want like the pieces, and there's
Yeah.
plenty of pieces that'll help. So, you know, as opposed to we need to turn this franchise around. Who's the one guy who can turn this franchise around?
Yeah,
So,
which I think is worth mentioning. Like the reason why I feel like they could trade back is I don't think they need anything so badly that if they don't get this position or player, then they're screwed. Like their roster is really good as it stands right now.
Right.
And you add Rodgers, and in theory add Ben Jones, in theory add Odell Beckham. All of a sudden you don't have as many holes on your roster, and you could focus on picking the best player available, which I know is maybe a misnomer because you know you're not just going to pick a running back. Like the Jets aren't going to pick Bijan Robinson at 13, and he'd probably be the best player available there, but. The Jets are as close to being in a position to just pick the best player as they've been in a very long time, I would say. And that I think that's worth noting. And when you're having the Joe Douglas conversation, I think it's worth mentioning because, you know, everybody knows how bad this roster was that he inherited. And there's almost nobody left other than like Quinnen Williams from when he first got here. So I guess CJ Mosley, like there's a couple stragglers, but they've built up this roster to a point that it's a legit roster. And so that's why this draft is going to be very interesting to see. Does Douglas try to cultivate more assets and trade back, or does he try and go all in and get the best guys he can by trading up? Like I think that's going to be more the topic than like who they draft, weirdly.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to watch how he changes, like you said, now that he has this sort of team as opposed to what he had before. And we'll be bringing it to you every step of the way, and we'll be all in on draft week as well. So definitely keep coming back here to the Can't Wait podcast. Subscribe if you haven't already. Give us a thumbs up. Give us a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, everywhere like that as well. And when are we going to be back? Well, we're going to be back when the Aaron Rodgers trade.
I get back. I'm supposed to get back from vacation on Tuesday. If the trade happens this weekend, I'll come off vacation to talk with you guys. And so maybe sometime late next week, I would say.
Next week. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. All right. Until then, everybody, we can't wait to talk more about this Jets team. Another fascinating offseason rolls along. We'll talk next time.